everybody. Wally Marshall, Mr. Crappie here with the Crappie Connection. I'm talking about the newest crappie information that you can find today with Mr. Brad Chappell and Justin Berry from the Show Me State, Missouri.
Thanks, Wally, for being here, man.
Hey, man, I'll tell you what. I'm so excited about being on this show, man, because there's nothing out there like this.
That's right.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
You listen to the first and only podcast dedicated to crappie.
Hey, y'all got to be the first, man.
That's right.
Hey, ain't nothing like being the first.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being here. Man, we can't thank you enough.
It's an
about
honor. Great honor. Great
Well,
honor.
man, I'll tell you, man, it's just been a lot of years of just grind, and a lot of trials and tribulations, you know, but probably my number one song is the Rhinestone Cowboy.
I'll be darned.
Getting cards and letters from people I don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But that is a trip for sure. Brad, would you say we want to start off on part 2 here?
You know, I think a lot of the viewers really want to know is how did you start out crappie fishing? How did your love of the sport grow? And just kind of go through the progression of Mr. Crappie.
Well, I'll start out. Yeah, I'll give you some of that. When I was a little boy, my parents are from Arkansas, and I got to go to Grandma's during the summer. And my grandmother lived in Manning, Arkansas, little town outside of Sparkman and Fordyce up there. And there was a creek right down there below the house. I can't even remember the name of the creek that come through there. Tulip Creek, I think is what it is. And we would actually walk from the house down there and take some cane poles. And whatever we caught, we ate.
Right.
I mean, it was like Grandpa's gone to the woods because he was a mule. He skinned them logs out there with a team of mules. I mean, my grandfather worked hard, man, on my dad's side and on my mother's side, too. He was in the cattle business. But, man, Grandpa Harry, man, I'm talking about, he snaked them logs out there with a team of mules. You in the woods with a team of mules. I remember he took me to work with him one day, and he said, you sit on that stump right there and don't you move. You'll get killed out here. And, of course, that was way before skidders and all kinds. So he had 6 mules that he turned in the woods, a lot of gin and jawing going on, and they'd back them up to them logs and drag them out to the road. And the trucks would pick the logs up by the highway. And that's what he did for a living. He was a tough old bird. He didn't fish or nothing, you know. And he might take a drink every now and then, you know. He might take a little sip. But, hey, man, that's just the way it was back then. But Grandma would take me fishing.
So your grandmother was your
My
inspiration
grandmother,
fishing.
Corrine Marshall, was the first one that took me fishing and showed me. And I remember catching grasshoppers and digging worms and
Really?
doing all that stuff. And we didn't have minnows. And so we just used worms, grasshoppers, or any kind of bugs you could put on your line, or some kind of chicken liver or something. That they like to eat them more than they like to fish with them, though, back then. So, but anyway, kind of learned from Grandma, and then she moved up to Little Fur Landing at Lake Washita. And she didn't have a depth finder. She didn't have nothing but an old John boat, and she told me where to go catch some crappie. That these tie up to these 2 trees and you'll catch them. So I go down there and I tie up to those trees and I'm fishing, and I ain't catching jack. So I pulled the boat up to the bank with a paddle, walked back up the house about a quarter mile. I said, Grandma, I ain't catching nothing out there. She goes, okay, I'll walk back down there with you. So we go back down there. And I go out there and tie up to them 2 trees and fish off the boat, you know. Okay, so I go back out there. She goes, you're on the wrong side. And so I put the boat on the other side of the tree, put them down there. Bam, 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 bam. I just started catching crappie, and she's standing on the bank watching me.
Wow.
And that was just so awesome. You know what I'm saying? Now that you think back on it, and she knew where they were at, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny how the old timers knew where the fish were, and today we've got side imaging, we got 360, and we got everything, and we still can't put one in the boat.
Some days like that.
Yeah.
Some days, Mama said there'd be days like that, you know. So, but grandmother started me out. Then I fished all the way through high school, you know, and and I bass fished just a little bit, but I didn't own a boat or anything. And then I was introduced in 1978 to wade fishing for crappie.
40 years ago.
Yeah, wading.
40 years ago.
Yeah,
What lake was that on?
It was on Lake Lavon in Lake Ray Hubbard, right there in the Dallas area, Garland area where I was raised up. And there was two people, Jack Caldwell. He worked at a plumbing supply house because I was a plumber, or a plumber's helper, and he worked at a plumbing supply house, and he wanted to take me crappie fishing. And we went out and we was wading with cane poles and a bobber and a minnow. And then there was one of my neighbors in 1982, Truel Peacock. He wade fished, and them boys back then, a pair of waders was hard to come by. And so they just go in their blue jeans. Water temperature 60 degrees, and you're out there wading around. And especially when you ain't catching fish.
It's cold.
It's cold.
Yeah.
But when you go to catching them, it's warm. You don't even feel it,
Yeah.
And so we were going down this bank line, and we was fishing in coontail moss. And I had a fly rod, I think it was a Berkeley cherrywood fly rod. And I was using that, and I was fishing behind him. Well, he wasn't letting nothing through because there's pockets in that coontail moss. You can just drop your jig in there. And not every pocket had a fish.
Right.
But finally he told me, he said, if you'll look at those pockets, the ones that are dingy, the fish are in there fanning. The clear ones, there's no fish.
Right.
And so I started, and so about two passes of that, I said, this next cove we go to, I'm going to start on the other side. And that way I'm not fishing behind him because he was draining it.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd drain it, and I wouldn't catch maybe one or two. But when you walk out there with them blue jeans on, you can only walk so far because it'd take your breath. It'd take your breath.
I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking
when
about.
you go under. But basically that's how I kind of got my start, is I learned from somebody else, how to wade fish. And, of course, when crappie tournaments came around in 1987, 5 years later, Truel's still my neighbor, and he wanted to fish with his son, and they were having this tournament at Cedar Creek Lake, and so I invited Truel's brother, Joel. Well, that was before Truel started fishing tournaments. So Joel was an electrician, and I was a plumber at the Garland Independent School District. And I had to beg him to go to Cedar Creek with me, and he goes, man, I don't know nothing about Cedar Creek. He goes, I don't know where the fish are down there. So I go down there 2 weeks prior, and I'm riding around, and I see this from the bridge, I see this long row of cattails, because that's where them crappie like to get up in them cattails in the springtime. And there was this one section that was really green. And so I drove around into this neighborhood, and I go back there, and I park in front of this guy's house, walk in. There's no fences, so I just walk down to the lake, and I get over around them green cattails, and I stuck my jig in the water right there by this boathouse. Caught one for the first time, I caught a fish. So that was 2 weeks from the tournament that I was thinking about getting in, And it was the first crappie tournament that ever come to Texas.
How much was that entry fee right then?
The entry fee, I have that on a picture somewhere. I'm going to say it was $50.
$50, okay.
I think it was $50.
All right.
And it might have been cheaper than that, but I remember in the tournament there was 289 teams.
Wow.
289. Imagine that, you know. And I fished with bigger entries in some tournaments. And so finally Joel said, all right, I'll go down there and fish with you. Well, the next week it snowed. Like the next weekend it snowed, and I'm like, man, them fish are going to move out of that shallow water, man. It done got cold. And
they didn't.
And so about Wednesday it just started getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And I lived about an hour and a half from the lake. And I put my waders on at the house. That's how excited I was. I couldn't even sleep, you know. It was like first tournament. And so we're going, and we pull up in front of that guy's house, and we get out, and Joel hadn't even got his waders on yet, and I'm sweating like a dog and getting out of there with them waders on. And I'm ready, and I stick that jig pole in there, and I'm catching them, and I'm throwing them up on the bank. And I look around, and Joel's standing there drinking a beer. And I go, Joel, what are you doing, man? He's like, dude, I'm nervous. I said, what are you nervous about? He goes, I never fished a tournament. I said, dude, you've crappie fished all your life. Get in here with me and let's catch these fish. Well, anyway, we're catching these fish, and doing really good. And we had them on stringers. And back then, they could be dead or alive, You didn't have to put them in no live well or anything.
Yeah.
And of course, we had them on stringers. And so every few minutes, you'd hear this noise, and it sounded like a motor. And what was happening at that house, their gray water from their washing machine and their dishwasher, whatever, drained into the lake right there. And so all the chemicals from washing powders, which is phosphorus and it's fertilizer. And so it had heated that water up right there. Oh,
my goodness.
And there were green cattails just right. Mm-hmm. The cattails wasn't 25, 30 feet long. Wow. And went out about 25 or 30 feet. And you could wade all of it. It was only about 3 foot deep at the deepest point. And, man, we had crappie laying everywhere. I mean, we just hammered them. So about 11 o'clock, we went and got a hamburger. We went to lunch. It's a tournament, man. We getting hungry, And so we went and got a hamburger, stayed gone about an hour, come back, and they started biting again. And we took our best. We didn't have no scales. We didn't have nothing to weigh them on. We didn't have no balance beam. We just picked the biggest 20. Because back then it was 20.
It was 20 back then.
You could weigh 20.
Wow.
We weighed 20 crappie that weighed 27 something. And we was the last ones to weigh in. And I had them in a black garbage bag.
Oh my gosh.
With no water. They were just all slimed up and everything.
Man, times has changed, hasn't it?
And so we put them in the basket to weigh them. And when the guy picked the basket up, he goes, we may have a new leader.
Wow.
Dude, I put them up there, or he put them up there, and we were the last ones in line and won that dang tournament.
I'll be done.
The first one I ever fished. And so you had, back then they had lie detector by Texas Ranger. And they took me to this hotel.
Really?
And they strapped me down. And I was like, he was behind me. And he goes, I'm going to ask you a few questions here and I want you to let us know, I'm going to ask you questions. It's yes or no. The first question he asked me, he goes, have you ever stole anything? And I said, yes, sir. I stole a candy bar at Cooter store, and I started telling the story. And he goes, it's yes or no. And so we had to start over. And so at the end of the deal, he goes, well, we got a problem.
Stole the candy bar.
And I'm not looking at him. He goes, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, we got a new winner of the crappie tournament. I said, well, who is it? He goes, you dummy.
How much did you win?
$3,500.
$35, man.
Yeah, they had some bonus deals if you was using this and that
Yeah.
and all that. But man, $3,500 when I was your age. I think I was 31 maybe. 87 till now. Yeah, that's pretty close. And it was just amazing of, shoot, man, it was just, I come out of that motel room, I don't remember my feet hitting the ground. Of course, then I was about 170 pounds soaking wet, and Joel, he was out there drinking a beer. It's like, attaboy, Joel. So, there's some pictures out there, and to win the first tournament you ever fished, and that kind of gave me it's kind of like listening to a story where the guy went up to the major leagues.
Yeah.
I love hearing those stories about guys when they get called up to the major leagues. But it's just, dude, I was just so pumped. And there was two guys at that tournament There was Dorsey Gibson that worked with Eagle Claw, and there was Jimmy Cunningham that was with Betts and B&M and Plain Old Men of Buckets, and both of them approached me at the deal and said, would you like to be an ambassador for our products, or would you be interested? I said, man, I don't know nothing about it. It's my first trip, and I said, where you live? And I said, I live in Garland. He goes, well, I live in Garland too. Jimmy Cunningham with B&M, and they repped the line with Duncan Lewis Sales. And went by his house, met with him. He showed me everything they had, Plain Old Men of Buckets, Betts, Jigs, B&M. So I started kind of being an ambassador for those companies after that. And the rest is history. In the next few years, won like 7 tournaments, wade fishing, doing that because I didn't own a boat. Eventually I got a boat. And then they come out with the Wally rule. You couldn't wade anymore. You had to fish out of a boat.
So you don't want no wait a minute. You don't want 7 tournaments wade fishing.
Wade fishing, yeah.
Because you didn't have a boat.
Because I didn't have a boat.
Wow! And then they made a rule, the Wally rule, where you got to be in a boat.
You got to be in the boat.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah, you got to be in the boat.
That's awesome.
And so I remember the first classic I fished, and that was on Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs that year in '87. And because back then they only took 50 teams, and they paid for everything. And so we go to Hot Springs, and I catch 1 fish in 3 days. 2-day tournament. I caught 1 fish, and I weighed that joker in. I'll never forget it. And I caught it on a dock. I just happened to. We actually borrowed a boat to fish the classic.
Yeah.
Or I ended up getting a boat. I can't remember. I think I got a boat and something. But anyway, we wasn't much on casting and finding brush piles and all. We weren't tuned to that. We was because I was landlocked, learning how to crappie fish. So, but that's how Mr. Crappie got started. And 10 years.
Where does the name come into play?
10 years later, I'd been taking a lot of outdoor riders fishing and stuff, and they had called me the crappie guru to the crappie king to the all kinds of names. And so I'm sitting there one night and I'm thinking, Mr. Twister, Mr. Catfish, Mr. Crappie. And so I pick up the phone and I call Joe Hall that owned Blakemore Lure Company, because he was my first sponsor, Blakemore Lure Company, in 1988. That's a whole nother story in itself. But anyway, I told Joe, I said, I'm thinking about trademarking Mr. Crappie. And there was a long pause. And he said, if you don't, I am.
Really?
And so I went to the public library because I didn't have a computer then. And I think that's back when computers was just coming out, really. And so I went to public library and looked it up, and nobody had the trademark. And I went to an attorney, and they drew it up, and Mr. Crappie is still a viable trademark today, and it's been very successful throughout the years. And But in '97, I had signed on with Bass Pro Shops. They wanted me to come and design crappie rods for Bass Pro. And so I went to Bass Pro Shops, and the first time they called me, I told them no, that I didn't want to do it.
Why?
Because a year prior, a company had approached me to do crappie rods, and we built the blanks and everything. Then they called me and said, well, we're not going to be able to pay you on this. And I told them, I said, well, if you build one of them, I'm going to sue you. Because they used me to get information of how to build crappie rods. And they had already been to Bass Pro Shop trying to get Bass Pro Shop to put them in.
Good thing you had a trademark.
I mean, it's a good thing that I didn't do anything with them.
Yeah.
So I had a bad taste in my mouth about it, about people. And Bass Pro said, you just come up here and we'll sit down and we'll treat you right. And for 15 years, I was with Bass Pro Shop designing crappie products for today's angler.
Yeah.
and it was funny, the first year at Bass Pro Shop, I had like a eighth of a page, and we only had 3 size rod, 8-footer, a 10-footer, and a 12-footer. And we took my design of the rods, and they ran with it, and they wanted to sell like 5,000 rods the first year, and we sold 11,000. And so it was like a barn burner.
Ding, ding, ding.
And I remember the days of being in Memphis, Tennessee at Bass Pro, because there was only one Bass Pro when I began, but being at certain crappie areas to where I'd sell 200, 250 rods a day.
Wow.
It's not like that today, but
Right.
you know, back
Yeah.
in the day when it was only B&M and Wally Marshall, basically in the crappie world. And today there's a lot of other companies. There's Denali, there's Jinko, there's a lot of good products out there today, you know, companies springing up all the time.
Yeah.
But hey, competition is good for business, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody just has light bread anymore. You know, we got
That's right.
a lot of different ways we can pick from.
Great way to
And,
put it.
and it is. I mean, you know, it's a competition is the best thing. It don't matter if it's tournaments or whatever you're doing. And then I left Bass Pro Shop in 2010, and I signed on with Lou's when Lynn Reeves was just, well, I think he had just bought the brand, and I helped him make that decision one night at a restaurant. He was thinking about just doing something with the guy that had Lou's, which was Casey Childress. He owned the Lou's brand. He was going to hire Casey because Casey was an engineer. And we was at a restaurant. I said, why don't you just buy it outright and maybe talk to Casey every now and then or whatever. He bought it outright, and I signed on with Lou's, and I design and they source. That's the way it works. And then I signed on with Strike King, and I design all the Strike King lures today, and I design them and they build them. And of course, we do a lot of testing prior to coming out with something. And just like the new Snapjack bait that we got coming for 2019, all of that. But the Mr. Crappie brand is Bass Pro Shop actually wanted to buy my brand when I left, and they just didn't put me in Destin, Florida in the sand, you know, for the rest of my life. So I guarantee it, if I'd have sold my brand, I'd have been sitting on the side of the road with a sign, "I'll fish for food."
Yeah.
You know, so don't ever sell your brand. Don't ever, you know, just stick with it, man. Good, bad, or indifferent, and not just think that
it has to have a special feeling for yourself when you go in a store or someone you've never been before and somebody recognizes you or you see your product being used by somebody. I just can't imagine how that feeling has to be such fulfilling.
Man,
and a blessing.
It's unbelievable, and this is the story of all stories. I got invited to an outdoor riders event in Buffalo, New York. And I go all the way to Buffalo, 2,000 miles.
It's a long way up there.
And I went up there to Niagara River. And it's a big smallmouth fishery. But they have crappies too. Lake Erie and all that up there has got crappies. And some of the locals was telling me, said, hey, you need to go to Lake Alice. And it's inland. So I drove up to Lake Alice just looking around, and there was this bridge, and there was a bunch of people lined up on this bridge, fishing off this bridge down about 15 foot to the water. And they were catching crappie. It looked like they were catching crappie. And so I'm pulling across this bridge, and I got my window down, and this guy goes, when I pull by it, he goes, was that Wally Marshall, Mr. Crappie? And so I go up, turn around, and I come back, and I see the guy holding my rod.
Mm-hmm.
In upstate western New York, you just never know who you. And he had my rod in his hand. He goes, dude, I got all your stuff, man. You make the almost, and just meeting folks like that. And of course, it's just humbling. People will come up and they'll want a picture. And this is what I tell people that's in the industry. You got 1 second to be the hero or 1 second to be a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to acknowledge the people that you never knew that loved you and loved your stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You definitely got a lot of fans out there.
Yeah,
and it's just, making that connection, man. And, I hear stories all the time that somebody else heard, somebody had met you, and my uncle had met you back when. And I especially like the ones when the little kids come up and they're bigger and they go, I remember meeting you when I was a little kid. And he's like 7 foot tall, So it's rewarding to have built a brand with other manufacturers helping you along, that believed in you, that every day that I get up, I've always got my foot on the gas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I never let up, because it's kind of like this. If this was full of water and you stick your finger in there and you pull it out, you see how quick it goes back together.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what it would be like if there wasn't a Mr. Crappie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason. The main reason I didn't sell my brand, because I had plenty of time to study it and do a lot of research on it. The best research I got, Stephen Jones, that owns the Dallas Cowboys, told me, Wally, if you need the money, I'll give it to you, but don't sell your brand. And so that was my deciding moment.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you've been great success in everything you've done since day one. But has there ever been a point where you was like, I'm about to be done with it? Like, has there ever been that point in your life with your so much success with Mr. Crappie?
No, because it's so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
When it's no fun no more, this is my goal every day. Put fun back into fishing. That's what I do on my TV shows with Protein Journal, is I put fun back into fishing, instructional, meeting new people every day, and it never gets old. Because you meet so many different people. You meet so many. And I've thought about an exit strategy one of these days maybe, and just pull away. I just got married back in April to Tanya from Tyler, Texas.
Congratulations on that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, man. She's a sweetheart. And she'd been in the cattle business 25 years, and we'd been dating about a month. And she goes, I got a question to ask you. I said, okay. She goes, what's a lure? And I go, man, what's a lure? And I go, that's something you fish with. And she goes, well, I just didn't know. And I was like, baby, we're going to get along just fine.
Yeah.
She's in the cattle business. My grandparents were in the cattle business. So we actually had a tie-in. And it was really cool because when I went to meet her dad, he's sitting in his chair and, meeting Dad for the first time, at the age of whatever I was, 59. And I met her dad, and he was telling about all his cattle business dealings and everything. And I said, well, did you ever meet my uncle or my grandfather from Justice Farms in Arkansas? And he reaches up in his pocket, and he got this little spiral. That's his phone book. And he's flipping through it, and he goes, is that them?
Oh, my goodness.
And he'd been doing business with my uncle.
That's awesome.
And my cousin. So
That's awesome.
Small world.
Yeah, it's a small world, man. But people that crappie fish are dyed in the blue people, and the thump never gets old, man.
That's right.
It
live for the thump.
It lived for the thump. I come up with that little saying several years ago, and I live for it every day. And a lot of people, just like last year, I was at the Pittman Creek show, and I had to take these people fishing. They have a fishing tournament prior to their distributor show. So I'm on Douglas Lake in Sevierville, Tennessee, and they got like a 35-foot drawdown in the wintertime. And I knew nothing about the lake, and I just kind of scanned over it one day and found some brush piles. about mid-morning, we go down. I said, I know where some brush piles are. We was fishing some bridges. And the people that were with me were from West Virginia. They owned a tackle shop there. And we pull up on this one brush pile, and there's 9 boats in the area. In this one, and we pull up on this brush pile, and we're just janking them in, just janking.
I like that. I've never heard that
still that.
Yeah, janking. Yeah, janking. We was janking them in, and me and this lady was sitting in my double down, and her husband standing behind us. We was just getting after it because I was running the trolling motor, and I heard this guy down the way. He wasn't about 50 yards over there maybe, and he goes, well, I could do that too if I fished every day. And I guess the guy in the back of his boat hollered at him and said, man, that dude's killing him or whatever. And he goes, well, I could probably do that too if I fished every day. And that lady in the boat she goes, do you fish every day? And I go, heck no, man, I have to work. So, just it never gets old, man.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit of like the crappie industry we was kind of getting into. You was talking about how you was coming up. What's the biggest lesson you learned since you've been in the crappie industry?
Patience. Because everything revolves on a year out, year in. You just got to be, I'm always like this, okay?
Yeah.
But Strike King and Lose has got the reins on me, because we have catalogs, we have all this stuff, that you just can't come out with something new every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the important lesson is be a great listener to what people have to say that are customers or other fishermen. Is very important because it gives you ideas of what needs to be in the future or what can be in the future. I've been very fortunate to have successful products, but the lessons are you got to have some thick skin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because never give up, never say never.
Never say never.
Because I've been told no a bunch.
More than probably yes.
Oh, probably more than a lot of yeses. Because I have some crazy ideas sometimes, and sometimes I've got some good ideas. And, man, I'll tell you, it's just been...
You say that real quick. Do you have one in the back of your mind that never came across? That you never produced, I'm sorry?
A lure or
something?
Yeah. I had a lighted yo-yo.
A lighted yo-yo.
Uh-huh. That was called the... I had a yo-yo that had a light on it. And when the fish would get on it, the light would come on.
Mm.
Okay? And we're going to ICAST to launch it. And it was called the Yo Daddy.
Yo Daddy.
And we get a call from an attorney.
Oh, man.
And there was a dude that had a patent.
Already on that?
No, I'm not on it. I mean, there was a dude that had a patent prior to us, and it was never found by the attorney until the week before we was to launch it. And we still have the product, and we have a utility patent on it. And it will come out one of these days. The Yo Daddy.
Spoiler alert.
Hey, it's but that's one product that I was just like really disappointed because we had already done it's unbelievable because it's all LED and you don't have to be looking for your yo-yo.
Yeah.
If it's set, if it's tripped, if it's set, it's not blinking, but if it's tripped, it's blinking. And then if it's got a fish on it, every time he pulls on it, it re-blinks.
Wow.
It's unbelievable, but that's just some stuff, man. It's just tough luck, and the guy that actually had the trademark on or the patent on it didn't even have a working product. That was the bummer.
That
was the bummer.
Yeah.
But hey, stay tuned. the yo day may be coming one of these days.
I gave up on it.
But anyway, it's
what's all right? Obviously, you're out there a lot. You're traveling all over the states. What's the one key thing you see most people make a mistake on in crappie fishing?
actually fishing.
Actually fishing.
Is they don't slow down enough.
Too fast.
They fish too fast. They fish way too fast. Being persistent, slow down, take your time. You don't have to wait on them, but make your presentations a little bit slower and you'll catch more fish. Sometimes size down, not necessarily size up when they get a little finicky.
Mm-hmm.
People don't like change. Well, if they're not biting what I got on right now,
yeah,
well, they're not biting. They're
Yeah.
not biting. Well, I tied that Coke can to that tree, and they're supposed to be here. Well, you came here yesterday, and you caught them all, and you marked the spot. Then you brought your buddies the next day, and there's nothing there. I'm just saying, being persistent and learn how to do more than one style of fishing. Like
Yeah.
Brad does the long line.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with your techniques.
Man of all trades.
he's a bobber guy.
Caster, he does it all, okay? But you have to be versatile to where, like, if you cross that Mississippi from Texas coming over here,
Mm-hmm.
you better be trolling. You
Yes.
better be doing something a little bit different. I'm not a big time troller, but I've done my plenty share of it, you know. And a lot of people say, well, I'll never troll, I'll do that. And then I see them out there trolling
Yeah.
many years later, and I'm like, thought you said you'd never troll, man. They's like, well, we got tired of getting beat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. So that's in tournaments or whatever. But my advice to somebody that's going to crappie fish is to slow down, pay attention to your surroundings. Why are you catching fish?
Pay attention to details.
A lot of people,
preach on it.
that are catching fish, they don't care what's happening. You
They
know,
don't pay attention to how
they
they're
don't
doing
pay
it.
attention. Like if somebody fishes with Brady Guides, he runs a guide business here. They're not paying attention to the details. They're just reeling in fish.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it really doesn't matter. But why are you catching those fish? That's the key. And my dad used to take me fishing, you know, and we caught a lot of sunburns,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and maybe not a lot of fish. But some trips we'd catch a lot of fish, you know. And so it's just he wasn't a big outdoorsman or a big fisherman or a hunter. But still, you just got to be persistent at what you do and really learn, put in, you know, a lot
Time
of
on the
people.
water.
Time spent on the water. The more you spend on the water, the more you learn. And I learn every day, and I've been in it a long time.
What's one piece of equipment that you have in your boat today that you've seen that's actually helped you put more fish in the boat more than anything else out there, from a bait to a whatever? What's one of your favorite pieces of equipment that if you had to go buy it right now, what would it be?
Man,
I got him.
boy,
I got him.
He got him.
boy, I'm thinking it's got to be my rod. It's got to be my rod.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, it's the sensitivity of a vertical, because I vertical fish, I cast.
Yeah.
Whether it's a 7-foot spinning rod or a 10-foot jig pole, that's in my arsenal every day. Is I have a 10-foot jig pole and a 7-foot spinning rod. That's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that. But that was a great question, man. That was that.
I got
Because
it.
I was like, I was wanting to say joker, shad pole. I was wanting to say a lure.
Yeah.
But man, it's the rod.
All right,
It's
I
the
got
rod.
one for you here.
Oh Lord.
All right, so obviously we always tell each other that you're always learning, right?
Always a what?
We're always learning when
Oh,
we're
yeah,
out there
yeah,
crappie
yeah.
fishing. What's the last thing you learned on your last few fishing trips?
I learned when there's a cold front that hit to size down. When I was at Truman Lake last year, the wind changed, the crappie quit biting. It was like somebody just flipped the switch. And I was using a joker, which is a 2-inch bait. And I sized down to my hair jig, Slab Daddy. It's just a small jig with a hackle feather tail, and we started whacking them. But I was just holding it and hold it and hold it. And when you thought you held it...
How long do you think you was holding it?
Sometimes up to a minute.
A minute.
A minute's a long time.
A
minute is a long time.
I never done it for a minute.
A minute. And all of a sudden they just...
Smash.
Not even moving it. Just holding it dead still.
Now, if you didn't... all right, you already knew them fish was there.
I already knew the fish was there.
Would you have held it that long if you didn't already catch some fish there?
Yeah. Yes.
I never held no jig no minute.
Well, I guarantee it. I learned that many years ago. We was having a tournament on Lake Louisville in Texas. And my fishing partner was Roger Putnam, and we was wading. But that morning there was ice on the deck of the boat. It'd come a hard freeze, basically, frost. And we were wading in flooded cuckleburrs. You know what a cuckleburr is? It's got a, yeah. And so there was flooded cuckleburrs, and we just hold it and hold it and hold it and hold it, and finally they'd hit it. And it was just crazy. And I did that back then. But what would give the fish away, he'd bump into one of them cuckleburrs and it'd rattle. When he'd bump into the stalk, they'd be fanning or swimming, and then you'd stick it in there and just hold it, and all of a sudden, bam, they'd hit it. And we was using no scent, no nothing, just straight jig. And actually what was he doing on Truman is just putting that jig in there and letting it go to the bottom. And we was actually just kind of dragging it real slow on the bottom and coming over them roots.
Yeah.
And they was just really whacking it. But I'm just saying again, slow down and then slow down.
Slow down, then slow down.
And then you're going to be more successful as a crappie fisherman. It's having patience of Joe, basically. Yeah.
What about scent? You just kind of touched on that a second. How much do you actually put scent out there?
There's no Mr. Crappie scent on the market.
For a reason?
None. No. I'm not saying there won't be in the future, but scent in the wintertime, I would agree that in the wintertime it helps when the water's real cold, because I've actually seen video of fish coming up and just looking at your bait. And fish can smell. Fish can scent that. And so they come up to it and they nudge it. They just nudge your bait.
Just lick on it.
And just basically what they're kissing on it or whatever. Because with Hook and Look, with Kim Stricker, we have done some underwater video on crappie with a lure. And there's 9 crappie looking at your lure at one time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, want to come in and just kill it.
Yeah.
And you never see that with the naked eye, like I was talking about.
Definitely.
And so I say scents help in the wintertime, not so much in the summer. You know, the warmer the water, the faster the movement, this, that, and the other. Just like we proved here time after time on Lake Washington, when you're long lining, you're moving that bait pretty quick, especially in the warmer temperatures, you know. So the colder it gets, the slow you got to slow down.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I know one thing that I wanted to talk about today was, you know, what you're coming up with in the future about this, your invitational tournament. Really get some details out there.
Oh,
yeah, you're going to talk.
Yeah, you know, everybody's been dogging me. Man, when are you going to release it? Man, when are you going to give the information? When are you going to do this, that? Well, I've been thinking about this for about 2.5 years, and I'd actually had a conversation with Jack Wells that owns B&M Pole Company, and I've had conversations with Gary Dalhon at Bobby Garland and Gene LaRue about doing a crappie expo and a $100,000 crappie tournament.
Wow.
That's big.
We're talking about cash money. We're talking about hard, cold cash, no boats, no gifts, no nothing. And so I'm come up with an invitational. Instead of just everybody get in, just show up and have a tournament, you actually get invited to this tournament. And so it's like I'm going to invite guys that have paid their dues in the crappie world that has fished 15 years or longer.
Oh, that's a great approach.
I mean, for the first year, that's what we're doing. The guys that have put millions of miles on their equipment, on their trucks, on their boats, and they get invited to this tournament. And I've talked to some of them, and some of them have, got older, and, their partner maybe had passed away or whatever. Mm-hmm. But still, they get to pick somebody to be their partner.
That's good.
Once, just one person of the team can actually get in on the tournament. And so I've contacted a lot of people. Right now I have about 70 teams that I've got.
Now 100 teams is going to be max, right?
100 teams max. That's all it's going to get in the tournament. And I know there's going to be a bunch of mad people mad at me because they couldn't get in. Well, you know what? Next year, in 2020, we're going to take the top 25 from ACT, take the top 25 from Crappie Masters, and the top 10 top 5 from other tournament trails around the country, that depending on how many people they have fishing their tour, of how many people they can get in. And what it's going to do, it's going to make people fish more tournaments to get in on the point system.
You're even helping out the other trails.
Right. That was the idea of growing the sport, because I'm trying to design a crappie industry show. It's called the Crappie Expo.
Where's this located at?
Hot Springs, Arkansas, at the Hot Springs Convention Center, October 4, 5, and 6 of 2019. So everybody that's going to be in the show, it's going to be all crappie. There's not going to be any bass companies, nothing. Boat companies, that have the aluminum boats and bigger boats too, pontoon boats, etc. And we're going to have the world's largest crappie fry, which is going to be
delicious.
Hey, when you tell people they can come somewhere and have crappie, it's going to be really good. And then the expo itself, we're going to have 2 concerts.
2 concerts?
We're going to have concerts, yes.
Who's coming to the concerts?
Jason D. Williams is going to be on there on Saturday, which is a piano player out of Memphis. Mm-hmm. And also I'm going to try to get a good country act for Sunday, and looking at a couple acts. I like John Anderson and, them guys. And I've got a little girl out of Fayetteville, Arkansas that may come in on Friday and do a little gig. But I'm looking at getting some really good draw in there on Sunday. And it's going to be in the same venue. You're not going to have to leave the building to go to a weigh-in. You're not going to have to leave the building to go to a concert, because it's going to be right in there with all the manufacturers. Yeah. And actually, we're just going to throw a big party.
I like it.
I love it.
Yeah,
I got to go.
Yeah.
How many manufacturers you got booked right now?
I've got about 35, 40.
And how many are you shooting for?
I'm shooting for 100 booths, but probably about 50 manufacturers. Strike King's in, B&M's in, Bobby Garland's in. I mean, it's just growing and growing. And see, when they sponsor the tournament, anybody that sponsors the tournament can pick 2 teams to fish in the invitational. So it's like a sponsor's exemption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like for you guys that hadn't fished up for 15 years or longer on the tour, you can get picked by your sponsor to fish in the event. So when they come on board with that, and it's going to be a 3-day tournament.
3 days tournament.
3-day tournament.
7 fish.
7 fish a day. We're going to have a short weigh-in. 2 o'clock's going to be the cutoff. You start fishing at 7. 2's the cutoff.
Oh, really? 2 cutoff.
2's the cutoff. Got to be in Hot Springs at 3 for the weigh-in. You know.
Did you say what? I don't remember. Did you say what lake it was on?
Lake Ouachita. It's going to be on Lake Ouachita. The lake is off limits to all anglers that's in the tournament until practice day of that week.
How many practice days you get?
5.
5.
You're all professionals. If you can't find fish in 5 days, baby.
Like, can you share info with other anglers?
No, you can't take any information from anybody.
I like it.
No information, because see, this is great for the guy that works all week.
Yeah.
You know, that he can set up and take vacation during that week and come and really have a good tournament.
Yeah, I'm one of them guys.
And enjoy theirself.
Live bait.
You can't take no live bait.
No live bait. This has never been done, right?
It never been done.
Never been done.
No live bait.
$100,000 on the line and no minnows for a crappie tournament. Man, I like it.
Well,
I like it a lot.
Our industry is not going to grow in crappie fishing tournaments if we don't go that direction.
I agree.
Man, me and Brad's been saying, Brad's been preaching it. I agree too. Talking about it.
And one of the sponsors of the expo is the Arkansas Minnow Association.
Oh, wow.
Arkansas Minnow Association?
Yeah. They're a sponsor
Could
of
you
the.
pre-fish with minnows and then come back with
No.
No
completely?
pre-fishing?
No.
I like it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. No minnows
Very
whatsoever. No minnows.
Man.
You
Minnows
know,
lives matter.
we're gonna. Yeah, exactly. We need to save more minnows. So, but if you're going to be professional, step up.
Yeah.
That's that blows my mind. That's awesome. And we talked about it, and you're the guy doing it right now.
But I want to grow the sport of our industry to where we have a show to bring to the end user, and that's the public.
Yeah.
What kind of exposure you going? What kind of media exposure you going to have? Are you going to try to like go all out where you have like televised live footage? Or
we're having televised footage inside the venue, so the people at the expo get to watch the guys fishing on the lake.
Cool.
And right before the weigh-ins, we're going to be rolling some tape in there and showing people. And
so you're going to have everybody that's in the expo can see what's happening live within the tournament out there.
Yeah, and there will be a list up there, you know, that shows who's in first and where it's moving.
Is it going to
back
be
and
cut
forth.
off from day 1 to day 2 to day 3, or
What's that now?
as far as the field?
Oh, yes, it starts with 100 teams, and on the first day, if you're not in the top 50, you're out. And those guys that don't make the top 50 have to come and work for their sponsors at the show. You don't come and work for those sponsors, you don't get invited back.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'm putting my foot down on that, because them bass anglers at FLW, BASS, when they don't make the cut, they go work for their sponsors and talk to those customers and talk to those people that come to the show. We've never been exposed like this. We've always not had a crowd. There was nobody to laugh and shout and cheer for you at a tournament. And now when I'm going to stick about 20,000 people in front of you,
Your heart's going to be pounding.
and so, especially on the last day when there's only 25 teams in the tournament.
So you're going to throw like confetti down and stuff like that?
Oh, man, there ain't no telling. We might throw a little smoke out there on the floor.
Throw some
you
bread
know?
out.
They might have a little smoke going on. And
I really like the idea where you say they got to come down and work for their sponsors. That's
Well, the
awesome.
public gets to meet these guys.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, they've never had this exposure before. And we're probably not going to spend a lot of time on stage until the last day of actually bringing the guys out and really digging deep into what they do and this, that, and the other because of a time frame deal. But the guys that get to meet the general public, and you have a picture to autograph that's going to be in a brochure that we're going to make, and that's got all the anglers in the tournament, 100 anglers, where kids can go around and get autographs from all the fishermen. Man, I've been to I don't know how many Bassmasters Classics. I've been to a lot of FLW events. I've been to a lot of tournaments and a lot of cups, and just see how the things work. And yeah, I'm using some of their strategy,
but it's working for them.
But it works. Yeah. Believe me, people love to get access. Yeah. We all love to get access. You probably like to go to a Dallas Cowboy game and get to meet Dak Prescott, or you'd like to get an autograph from him, or you'd like to meet whoever from one of the singers NASCAR in Leonard Skinner or Alabama, or a NASCAR driver. But having access, and so the public now is going to have access to professional crappie anglers.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely need to mark your calendars for this.
Yeah. Hey, mark the date, and I'm going to do. He was asking about what I was going to do to draw people. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make a commercial that's going to play in Arkansas for 2 weeks prior to the event. We're going to have billboards, world's largest crappie fry, do you crappie fish, and then put the date and where on the billboards and do that kind of stuff.
And Crappie Connection.
Crappie Connection will be there. Crappie Connection will be there. Man, it's just a lot of information to put out there, and it's never been done. And
now the public don't have to pay to come in, right?
It's free.
It's free.
It's free. It's free
crappie fish, or free crappie fry.
Yeah, free crappie fry.
I'm trying to get it out there.
but they will have to get a ticket from a manufacturer or from a dealer to go to the crappie fry.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of like an invitational. You get invited to the crappie fry.
Yeah.
It sounds like just a wonderful thing for the sport of crappie fishing. Man, I'm looking so much forward to it. And we've talked about it before today that, I'd call Wally up and, man, it's very exciting to see where this is going.
Brad has called me up going, how can I get in this sucker? He's like, how can I fish for this $100,000? And I was like, man, I'm sorry. You're going to have to get picked by one of your sponsors, dude. I mean, and I'm, my guys, my pro staff members have called me going, man, can I get in? No.
Yeah. I like how you're doing that.
You're
very structured with it.
I'm just very out there with it, and it's going to be a fair deal. It's going to be fair for everybody. Mm-hmm. You leave at a certain time, you be back at a certain time. It's not like you start on your fishing hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
You leave at a certain time, you be back at a certain time.
You going to do this every year from here on out?
For the next 10 years, I'm going to do the Crappie Expo, the Mr. Crappie Invitational, and the fish fry.
So the next decade,
if the states will allow me to do it.
Are you contracted for the next 10 years?
No, because I'm going to each venue separately. It's hard to get sponsors for 10 years, but I'm just saying that this is where we're starting, the first one. And I told all the sponsors, whatever you give me, I'm going to spend it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
On advertising. So I want to see crappie fishing growing. The only thing that I would like when they put me under is the pioneer of crappie fishing.
Yeah.
I think you got it.
You got it covered.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just thinking maybe they get there, but I want to earn it. Mm-hmm. I want to earn that.
If you think you hadn't earned it now, you're wrong.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I just want, I hear a lot of people say, man, me and my buddy was out fishing the other day, and we just looked up and said, what would Wally do? Mm-hmm. We're not catching them. What would Wally do? And I'm like,
starts to think of that.
Huh?
What would Wally do? I'm like,
what would Wally do right now? We're not catching nothing. Hey, don't get me wrong, man. I've had some tough days on the water too. When them suckers just don't want to bite some days. And
if you're saying you never had a bad day, you're lying yourself.
Right, and so.
Now, get back on the invitation. Are you planning on staying in the same region what you're doing it now, or do you already have an idea for the next 2 or 3?
What I'm going to do is actually I've got an idea of the cities I want to go to, but they have to have a big enough venue to have the expo.
Mm-hmm. Can you share it with us?
I can't go. Hey, I'm probably going to go east after Hot Springs. Mm-hmm. So. But they have to have a big enough coliseum to where all the manufacturers can be there.
Oh, yeah.
and all the people to get in there. So it's just.
How do we grow the sport in the West? I know that's where Justin's mind's already going.
Yeah.
But how do we grow the sport to get it more out West involved?
Man, I don't know. It's just they have so many rules and regulations in other states about how many you can keep or how many you can this, that, and the other. I don't know. I really don't know that. I know that they have some derbies.
Derbies.
They call them derbies in California and Oregon, Washington State. They have some crappie derbies.
You heard of that, Brad?
Mm-mm.
What's a derby? Enlighten us.
Like a tournament, but it's an all-day deal or a weekend type deal, and they pay on biggest fish, smallest fish.
Okay.
You know, not so much an hourly deal. Or
what's the farthest west you've been?
Farthest west I've been is probably Kansas.
Kansas. Man.
I was out there pheasant hunting in Kansas, and I ran into a game warden. And he goes, "What are you doing out here chasing these bluebirds?" And I said, "Well, that's my love, is quail hunting." And a lot of people don't know that I raised bird dogs from 1979 to 1994, as I bird hunted every weekend in the winter that I could, and run bird dogs for a long time. And this game warden said, "Well, at Cedar Bluff up here in Kansas, the crappie are biting really good." And I go, "What's the limit?" And he goes, "There's not one."
Really?
We left the next day and went crappie fishing. And I'm not going to say how many we caught, but it was in the hundreds. And we cleaned fish plumb till the next morning.
Wow.
There was 8 of us. And they were out on the dam area of this lake. It was wintertime, of course. And it didn't matter. You could throw it out there blindfolded, just catching crappie. Yeah.
Mm.
And I had this guy that was a little bit older than me, and I said, "Burl," I said, "we don't need to keep them 9 inchers now. We don't need to they hard to clean, you know, About 9 inches ought to be about the limit." I seen him catch this little old bitty fish, and I didn't hear it go back in the lake. And I turned around and I said, "Burl, did you keep that fish?" And he goes, "Yeah, I did." I said, "Well, why didn't you throw him back?" And he goes, "If my wife knew I threw back a crappie, she would whoop me." And I go, "Okay, Burl, you can keep all you want."
Right.
So, but no, man, I tell you, I've fished from New York to Chicago area to down in Florida, furthest Florida is Okeechobee. Fished in the Carolinas, north and south. Not so much in Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky. Fished a lot of.
So, what's your favorite lake?
Favorite lake.
And why?
Right now would probably be, this day and time, would be Lake Fork, Texas.
Right now. Single pole?
Huge. I guided there in the early years from 1989 to 94. I was a guide on Lake Fork, Lake Lavon, local lakes around Garland. But single poling, standing timber, there's nothing like it on single pole standing timber, because when those big whitefish, and when Lake Fork first started out, it was a lot of black crappie, not so much white crappie in there.
Oh, really?
And now there's been a white crappie explosion in that lake, and it's unbelievable, because you can catch a easy 15 to 17, 18 pound string in the springtime.
That's awesome. I'll try to
So
get down there
that's
one
7 fish. Yeah. And
over 2.5 average.
it's 2 years ago, Jeff and I, my partner since 1992, we didn't even think we was close to winning, but we tied. Tide, and some boys out of Missouri had caught a crappie that weighed 330.
Wow.
And they beat us on big fish.
Wow.
And that's okay. We had 7 crappie that weighed 1437. And that was after the spawn. It had been during the spawn, it had been over 15 pounds.
Wow.
Easy.
But Cedar Creek Lake is my best dock shooting lake, and Lake Fork, Standing Timber. I fell in love with St. Johns River in Florida.
I hear about that a lot.
I did a show there that's going to be out this coming year. Matter of fact, I'll have 2 shows on the Outdoor Channel in January. One's on the St. John River, casting, and one, nobody casts in Florida. They're all trollers, they're all longliners, or they fish with a long pole and the lily pads. But I did a show casting. Water temperature was 90 degrees in June. See, nobody fishes in Florida. Like in the summertime, they really don't fish because it's too hot or this or that. And so I happened to go down there, and I was going to do a dock fishing show and caught some good fish off the docks. And cameraman showed up, and we started fishing docks at 10:30. I didn't have fish in the boat, not even a bite. It came a big rain a few days prior, and I didn't know it, and the current got strong. So I moved off in some flats and found some brush piles and smoked them. I had 80 fish in one day.
Dang.
From 10:30 to dark, and it was unbelievable. So you'll be able to see that on Pro Team Journal. I do all the crappie segments on Pro Team Journal, and you can Google that or look it up on YouTube on previous shows that we've done. I get to do a couple of shows a year, and then they do some stuff on Sportsman's Channel too. So
yeah. Before we close it up, we all like to eat crappie. Tell us your best way to how you prepare it and eat it real quick.
Well, I'm a fried man. You know, you can tell by looking at Mr. Crappie, he likes to eat. but
Like what cornmeal you use? Let's see some details real quick.
Well, I use straight cornmeal.
Straight cornmeal.
Straight cornmeal, and I doctored up a little, and I just ran across a brand new product. It's called, and I'm not sponsored by them or nothing. I just run across this product. It's called Camp Dog.
Never heard of it.
Camp Dog. They're out of Louisiana, and they have a shake spice, and they've got some Louisiana hot sauce type stuff. You know, the red stuff you sprinkle on your fish or whatever.
Yeah.
And you just mix it with some cornmeal. And to tell you a story about, I did a fish fry at Buck Knives, one of my sponsors, Buck Knives, up in Idaho. They cook everything in flour. And I went up there and did a fish fry. I shipped about 140 pounds of crappie overnight to Buck Knives. Flew up there 2 weeks later, July the 1st, and fed 314 people for lunch. And I couldn't find no cornmeal. And I had to go to Washington State to a Costco to find some off-brand cornmeal.
Wow.
Which we didn't have in Texas. But it was cornmeal. So we cook all these fish up, and the people were just raving about, how did you get it so crispy? How did you... The flavor is phenomenal. I've never eaten crappie. Man, this is awesome. Heard it all.
Yeah.
And finally I told them it's cornmeal and crappie where I come from. You know, so actually Camp Dog makes a spice that you can blend in with your cornmeal that's got all the ingredients. And some of it cooks out when you're frying it. But I'll tell you what, it's got a good taste.
I'll try it.
Yeah.
It's got a
Google that when I get home.
Camp Dog, baby.
Camp Dog.
Gotta catch it.
Oh, Camp Dog. But, man, just being on you guys' show, man, it's lifting for me.
That's good.
Because I get to talk to you out there, the public.
That's right.
That, you know, I've been on TV shows and all that, but I'm not actually talking to the public. And I think this format right here is really good.
Man, we definitely appreciate you being here.
It's an honor having you on the show.
Not do people take time out of their schedule and drive 7 hours to come over here to be on this show today. And I can say for myself and also Justin, and that, man, it meant a whole lot for us. And I know it means a whole lot to anybody listening and watching the show, for you taking the time out and doing it, and really appreciate you doing it.
Oh, I'll tell you what, 7 hours is just a short time of my life. You know, it's like a minute.
Yeah.
Because I drive about 90,000 miles a year.
You like a good road trip, don't you?
Hey, man, I'm always up for a good one. I've been fortunate enough. I've been sponsored by Ford Motor Company since 2003, and I put about 90,000 miles a year on a vehicle.
Man,
and
that's
go to a lot of places. A lot of people say, "Man, I see your truck everywhere. I see it. I've seen it over Mississippi. I've seen it in Kentucky. I see, you know." But I spend a lot of money on fuel, but you know what? You can't make a living sitting at the house.
That's right.
Especially in this industry right here, because I feel like the more people I touch and bring them into crappie fishing, the more successful we're all going to be.
Absolutely.
In this industry, and I just appreciate you guys for just putting on the mindset of, you're going to learn as you go along, and how to reach out and how to touch all these people, and for all the listeners out there, I'm going to talk to you right now, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting the Mr. Crappie brand, supporting Wally Marshall, and if you hadn't, you will, because I want to design the finest crappie products on today's market for you guys to be successful on your next crappie trip. Guys, thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate you.
Enjoyed it, man. It was really good.
We will do it again.
Hey, and for inviting me on the show, I've got one of my new knives for both of you guys.
Woo! Appreciate it.
Heck yeah. Thank you.
It will be here at the Crappie Connection.
Yeah.
Hey,
on the mantle.
Be up on the mantle right there.
Right.
Well,
Guys, y'all heard it first from Mr. Crappie himself, Wally Marshall. I'm Justin Berry.
I'm Brad Chappell.
We'll see y'all next time.
and Mr. Crappie says goodbye.
See y'all later.
Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift